So my objectives for today's presentation, I want to foster an understanding of the various steps of the evaluation process. And so I've outlined those within the 6 steps listed over here in the agenda. And then I also want to provide a space for you to think about how you can apply these steps to your own ESSER funds. And so after we go through each one, I'll provide a few minutes for you to think about your own programs and how you might integrate these steps into those. And so at the end of this presentation, I hope you have some tangible next steps that you can start to integrate into your own evaluation plans as you start your program implementation. And throughout this, I know we have a smaller group, so if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. You can also pop them in the chat, and when we have these like kind of think sections, I can look through and answer those too. So feel free to reach out in any way that makes sense to you. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. At first, I wanted to provide an introduction to what evaluation is to frame this presentation. And so I like this definition by Russ Eft and Prescott, 2009. And I'll read it out loud and then just point to some of the key areas that I like about this view of evaluation. So first, they provide a view of evaluation as a systematic process. And it's thought as should be conducted as, not conducted as an afterthought, but rather as a planned and purposeful activity. Second, evaluation involves collecting data regarding questions or issues about society in general and organizations and programs in particular. Third, evaluation is seen as a process for enhancing knowledge and decision-making, whether the decisions are related to improving or refining a program, product, process, system, or organization, or determining to continue or expand a program. And so I really like this view of evaluation as a process for enhancing your knowledge about a program, and that it's kind of this continuous process of improving and refining your program model, ultimately to make sure that your programs have better impacts for your participants, students, teachers, whoever is involved in your program. And so I'm going to be taking this view of evaluation as a process for continuous improvement within this presentation, and hopefully showing how we can use evaluations to improve our programs. And there's various reasons why we might conduct evaluations. One might be mostly like accountability based, right? You might have a funder who wants to know whether you're using the funds as you said you were. Are you producing the outcomes that you wanted to? But we might do it for more developmental purposes as well. As we're creating our programs, we want to see how we're actually implementing our activities. Are they leading to our anticipated outcomes? And this can help us refine our program activities as we're going along the way. It might add also to our knowledge base about what the outcomes of our program are. And both of the latter two can identify different gaps or challenges to our program's implementation, lead to resolutions and refinement of our program model, and also some lessons learned. And so we can kind of think of 2 purposes of evaluation. Evaluation can be more formative, so thinking about that developmental piece, and it can help design and assist the program's development. And we can think of this perhaps as like if you use map testing data in your classroom. And so if you think of your classroom as a program, perhaps you periodically check your map testing data for your students, and you might make adjustments to your pedagogy or curriculum based on how your students are doing. And so this is kind of the more formative piece. You're looking at data as you're going along and making adjustments. Evaluation can also have more of a summative purpose. And so this is kind of the overall program impact. And it's kind of designed to see if we should continue or expand a program. It's these kind of no-go decisions. And a summative kind of assessment that you might use for your students might be kind of these end of year state assessments. This is kind of a summative view of maybe how they performed in certain outcomes throughout the year. And rather this formative piece of changing your program as you go along, this is kind of an end of year result. And so with this view of evaluation in mind, I'm going to walk through the cycle of evaluation. And so this cycle is actually developed from the CDC. They have a really good handbook about the different aspects of the evaluation process, and I'll share that as a resource at the end if you want to look through it. But they outline these 6 key steps to the evaluation process. And there is like a logical order to these steps, but it can really be applied to any evaluation or program at any stage of development. And so for the rest of the presentation, I'm going to really structure it around these 6 steps and walking through how you might integrate that in your program. So the first step in the process is engaging stakeholders. And first, just thinking about who are stakeholders. And so stakeholders are individuals who have a vested interest in the outcomes of the program. And so we can think of stakeholders as both direct and indirect beneficiaries of the program. They might be directly the people who are involved in developing the program, so your program staff, program director, or the people using the program, so maybe students, any other program participants. But they could also be indirect, so it could be maybe the families of the students who are participating in the program or the larger community that the program takes place in. And we really want to develop stakeholder involvement because it can improve the relevancy of our evaluation. We want to make sure that our evaluations are developed to meet our stakeholders' information needs. And by doing that, we can increase their commitment to the evaluation if they see it as a relevant and credible process. And this logistically not only helps facilitate the evaluation process, right, developing that trusting relationship, but it also can increase their commitment to the evaluation findings and increase evaluation use. And so if we involve the stakeholders throughout the evaluation process, the design, implementation, it can really increase this likelihood of use. And we can see that in contrast to maybe an evaluation study where the evaluator kind of swoops into a program and provides the evaluation. The program staff might not see that as a credible process and it might not meet their needs. So that's a little bit of why we want to involve stakeholders in the process. And different activities that we can do to facilitate the stakeholder involvement. We really want to coordinate their input throughout the process. So thinking about the evaluation design, its operation, and its use. And when thinking about which stakeholders to involve, we can think about consulting different insiders of the program process, so different leaders, staff, clients, as well as outsiders like these indirect beneficiaries that I noted before. I think it's also important to make a special effort to promote the inclusion of less powerful groups or individuals too, who might not normally have a say in the evaluation process, and to make sure that the evaluation is relevant to their needs as well as just maybe the leadership team in the process. With that in mind, it's also important to avoid excessive stakeholder identification. Having maybe like too many cooks in the kitchen makes it difficult to actually integrate the evaluation, and it can prevent its progress sometimes. So we want to just be really intentional and meaningful with how we decide which stakeholders to involve. And we can kind of think about this. This is just a simple evaluation stakeholder engagement plan. So you could think about the different stakeholder groups or individuals you might want to involve, their role and their responsibility in the evaluation process. Some people might just be consultants that you tap into a couple of times in the evaluation process, while others might be an integral part of your evaluation team. So thinking about like the level of involvement you might have those stakeholders participate in what ways they might be involved, and how they might give feedback to the evaluation. So these are just little items that you can consider along the way. So I'd like to provide a little space for you to think about how this might apply to your ESSER funds. And so thinking about your program, who might be some key stakeholders that you would want to involve in the evaluation? What role do you see them playing in your evaluation, and how might you go about engaging them? And it's my understanding that you all might be from different programs. So I just wanted to provide a couple of minutes for you to kind of think on your own. Maybe you can jot down some ideas about your program. And so I'll give us maybe like 2 minutes to think about this. Okay. So I hope that gave you a chance to think about the stakeholders who'd you like to involve in your evaluation. Does any questions come up for anyone about this process? Okay, great. So we're going to move on into step 2, which is describing your program. And your stakeholders that you identified can be really helpful in describing the program. And the program description will really set the stage for your subsequent evaluation activities. And even if you're involved in designing the program, I find it's helpful to go through this process of describing it and perhaps having other stakeholders have input in this, just to make sure you're all on the same page about what activities you're going to be conducting, what your anticipated outcomes are going to be, because even when you're designing the programs, people might have different ideas about the program effects. And some different aspects that you could include in your program description is thinking about the need or the challenge that you're trying to address by implementing this program. The expected effects, activities, and resources used to carry out the program. Its stage of development, is it a new program or has it been around for years? And the larger context, and you could think of maybe the social, political, economic context that this program takes place in. And one way we can provide a program description is through a logic model. And you might have seen these before in your work, but it's a systematic and visual way to present your shared understanding of your program. And so showing the relationship among the resources you have to operate the program, your planned activities, and then your anticipated outcomes. And so each of these pieces within this program will inform each other. So we're thinking about how your resources are connected to your activities, its anticipated outputs, and then those outcomes. And so just defining each of those terms a little bit more. So your inputs, those resources, those can be thought of as human, financial, and material resources. So it could be the staff, your space that you need to conduct the program in. The activities, those are your planned program activities. So those are the actions taken and the work performed to carry out your program. The outputs, these are more of like the tangible products from your activities. So they're the product, capital, goods, and services that result from the intervention. So perhaps you have an activity that is a professional development training. Your output might be 50 teachers trained, right? So it's like kind of the direct output from those activities that you produced. Outcomes, on the other hand, are more of these changes that result from the program. So they could be changes in awareness, knowledge, skills, and capabilities from being involved in your intervention. And last, impact is kind of the large scale, long-term societal level changes that you hope to achieve based on this program. And as I mentioned before, each of these steps in the logic model are interconnected. And so we can think of connecting those with these if-then statements. And so this is kind of the logic of the model. So you have your inputs and resources. If we have those inputs and resources, then we say that we can accomplish these activities. If those activities are accomplished, then we would hope to deliver the services in a certain amount of product or services. If we implement those activities to the extent that we plan to, then we would anticipate the participants to benefit in a certain way. And if those participants benefit in that way, then we would expect to these larger changes in community or societal level. And so that's kind of how each of the pieces of the logic model are connected together. And so here's one example. I'll provide a couple examples of the logic model. I find it's easier once you see it with some inputs in it. And so this is kind of just an example about if you're planning a holiday vacation and you wanted to do it in a logic model format. And so some resources or inputs that you might have within your logic model if you're planning this family vacation. It could be like your holiday flight schedule, your family schedules, frequent flyer miles, and the holiday weather, right? These are some inputs or resources that you need to plan this vacation. Your activities, once you have these schedules, you could create a family schedule. You could purchase your flight tickets. You could arrange ground transportation, right? These are the actual activities. The direct outputs from those activities would be that all of your family members have a ticket, right? And maybe you use your frequent flyer miles, and so money is saved. Your outcomes, so these changes in behavior, attitudes, that could be enjoyment of your vacation, and then your larger impact might be continued good family relations. Okay, so that's kind of how this logic of this model is. So we can apply this to more of an education-focused example, though, as well. And so this is a tutoring program. It's a fictitious program as well, but perhaps you're putting on this tutoring program and you have certain inputs, right? You need your space, budget, staffing, and materials in order to put this on. The activities that you might have within your program, you have to recruit your tutors, you got to train your tutors, and then the tutors actually work with the students. And your direct outputs from those activities, perhaps in this program, you want to train 120 tutors. You expect that each tutor will attend 3 trainings throughout the year. And you also expect that each tutor provides maybe 3 hours of service each week to students. The larger outcomes from those activities is that the tutors develop the skills that they need to be successful, right, based on those trainings. By participating with students, they feel more connected to the community, and then the students themselves feel more supported in these academic subjects. And we can also move on to a next step with this logic model too, which is through developing measures for those activity or for those outcomes. And so this is a way to determine whether your program is working in the way that you intended to. And so we might say that a successful program would look at like 75% of the tutors who participated reported skill mastery in these tutor skills. 90% of the tutors report an enhanced community connection, and 75% of students feel more confident in their academics. And so this is kind of the evaluation piece gets in there, right? This is how we're going to judge whether or not we have a successful program. All right, and so this is the larger scale thing of the tutoring program. And so you can see how each of these inputs can be fleshed out a little bit more. So you could actually specify what facilities you need, your budget funding, where that's coming from, and how your activities can be designated by different program staff or tutors, and also specifying both like short-term and long-term outcomes. So this is a way we can expand our logic model to a more complex program. All right, and so there's several reasons why we might develop one of these logic models. For one, it builds a shared understanding of your program rationale and strategy. Often we're working with a bunch of different program staff, and so to make sure we're all on the same page about what the rationale of the program is. It can provide a good summary of a complex program that we can refer back to and facilitate this program management. And how are the resources being used? Are we implementing the activities that we intended to? And for the evaluator end of things, it really helps to structure our data collection plan. And so I'll note that next in the next step, how we're going to use this model in order to develop our evaluation questions and start to collect some data. All right, so I wanted again to give you a little bit of time to think about how you might develop a logic model for your own program. And so first thinking about what the challenge is you're trying to address with your program. And then we'll first start just with like a simplified model. So think of the 2 core activities for your program and what might be associated outputs and outcomes. And then if you'd like, you can try to think of a measure for that outcome, right? So what would a successful outcome look like to you? And so similarly, I'll give us just like a couple minutes to kind of think about these questions. Okay. So I hope that gave you a chance to start thinking about how this might apply to your program. We're going to go ahead and move into step 3 of the evaluation process. And this is developing your evaluation questions. And so I'll go through the development of both implementation and impact evaluation questions. And so first, implementation evaluations. So implementation evaluations can be helpful to show us whether our activities are being implemented the way that we want them to. How well are they being implemented? To what extent is the program being implemented the way that we designed it? And is the program accessible and acceptable to our target population? Are we reaching the students or participants that we wanted to with our program? And this is really helpful for if we're monitoring how well our program plans are being implemented. We can make mid-course corrections if things aren't working out the way that we intended. And we can also see how various components of the value or of your programs fit together. And it's really important if we're doing an impact evaluation as well. We really want to know what is this program that's being implemented in order to say what ends up being effective, right? And so this implementation piece is a really crucial component of your evaluation. We can also do impact evaluations too. And so the impacts, those focus on the outcomes. So if we think of our logic model, right, those are our short, medium, and long-term outcomes. And so they can show us the degree to which our program is affecting our target population and whether a program is meeting our objectives. And so, right, if we think of our logic model again, we see our impact is related more to our outcomes, and then our implementation, we're looking at our activities and outputs, and if those are being implemented the way we expected. And so here are some types of questions that you might ask yourself if you are developing evaluation questions for an implementation versus an impact evaluation. And so for an implementation evaluation, you might ask yourself, how well is the program being implemented, or just how the program is being implemented? Do the processes meet different quality standards that we might have set for ourselves? Is the program being implemented correctly or to fidelity to the program model? And how satisfied are the program clients or participants with the program, and which ones, right? Are there certain clients that are more satisfied than others? For impact, we might ask ourselves, how well did the program work? Did the program produce its intended short, medium, and long-term outcomes? To what extent can changes in participant behavior be attributed to our program? And are there particular features of the program or contexts that made more difference than others? Are certain components of our program more effective than others? And so if we return back to our tutoring example with our logic model, here are just some sample evaluation questions that we might ask ourselves. So this is similar to what was on the previous slide, but to what extent does the tutoring model adhere to our overall program model, right? Are we actually implementing those activities that we set out to implement? Which practices do the tutors find most helpful? What are the reactions to these courses and trainings? And are there any barriers to the program's implementation? For impact, we might think about, are there particular units or lessons that the program that had the most impact? And then also connecting the program to our anticipated outcomes. So is a participation in the program associated with improved community connections, right? That was one of our logic model outcomes. And is participation in the program associated with improved student academic outcomes? So you can see that connection there. All right, so similarly, I'll just give us a minute to brainstorm this. So if you're able to jot down some stuff for your logic model, go back and take a look and develop maybe one implementation and one impact evaluation question from that logic model. And I can go back up here and show us these questions again, if that's helpful. Okay, so we're going to transition into step 4, which is actually gathering your evidence to answer these evaluation questions that you specified. And I'm going to present a formative approach to data collection for continuous program improvement. And so in this approach, we're going to undergo multiple tests of small changes in your program, which will cumulatively result in a larger system change. And so this continuous improvement cycle can be thought of through 4 steps and following this plan, do, study, act cycle. So I'm not sure if you've seen this before in your work, but there's 4 main steps. And so the first one is to plan. And so this is kind of setting an intention for your intervention. So it's changing some piece of your practice. So perhaps you're in your classroom and you're changing an aspect of your curriculum or your pedagogy within your classroom. And also in this planning stage, it's also selecting measures to develop for your data collection plan. And so you implement this change within your program or your classroom, and you collect data to see how well it's being implemented. So you might collect data on student outcomes or student perceptions of the program. And then you study it. And so you examine the data, you look for many gaps or areas of improvement. And then based on that data, you can change a piece of your practice and then again, go back to the plan stage and implement that change, collect data, and then make some changes to your practice. So it's this ongoing process of continuous improvement, of making small changes or implementations of your program, studying those changes, and then integrating it into your work. And we can think of this if you wanted to set like a continuous improvement calendar, thinking about how to integrate this throughout your school year cycle. And so perhaps in the summer or in the fall, you start developing, right, your stakeholders, engaging your stakeholders, figuring out who you want on your evaluation team, developing those evaluation questions or how you want to focus the program. And then throughout the year, you can integrate these different PDSA cycles for continuous improvement. And then at the end of the year, you might look over the PDSA cycles and see what worked and what didn't work, and offer some overall conclusions about your program or intervention. And so it's kind of like during the school year, you're refining your program model, and at the end, you can look at some larger program outcomes. And so this is just a quick example based on one of those questions that we had earlier about the tutoring program. So perhaps one of your evaluation questions is related to tutor satisfaction with the program. You could develop some surveys throughout the year. You integrate those surveys, you look at the data, you change the course or the curriculum based on that data. And so this is kind of how the continuous improvement cycle works. You can also do it related to impact kind of questions. And so perhaps you're looking at improved student outcomes. And so similarly, we might use like the MAP data or some other formative data that you collect about student outcomes and periodically look at that throughout the school year and make different corrections to the program based on that data. And when we think about gathering evidence, there are some things we'd like to consider. First, you want to think about the different indicators. So what are those measures that you're going to get at in order to answer your evaluation questions? What sources of data are you going to collect? So is it going to be from people? Is it going to be documents, perhaps observations of classrooms? What's the quality and the quantity of that data? And so is the information trustworthy? Do you think it's a reliable and valid data source? Perhaps you know that a data system within your school might have a lot of missing data, or maybe it's not up to quality. And so you might not want to rely on that data source and look for something that you see as valid and reliable. And what's the quantity? What amount of information is sufficient? And I like to think about who are you talking to? Are you getting a well-robusted view of what this program is? Or are you just talking maybe to people from leadership position or who is directly accessible? And so that's something to consider when we're thinking about the quantity. And then just logistics, what techniques and timing and physical infrastructure do you need to collect this data? And so thinking about that calendar, right? How can we map out in the school year, when are we going to collect this data? How are we going to collect it, by who? And where are we going to like store and keep that information? And so this is just a little spreadsheet that kind of gives you a direction if you're looking at different data sources. And so you might think of a potential data source, think about, provide a little description of that data source, of where is it located, how often is it collected, where do we currently use it, and is it something that you have already? Is it an existing data source that you can tap into, or do you need to collect this data? And these are just some examples of different data sources. And so you could think about different standardized assessments. So like different district assessments, state assessments, AP tests, college admission tests. Other indicators of student achievement. So these could be like classroom-based assessments, work samples, end of unit tests. Also non-academic student data that could be used as measures. So attendance data, retention rates, that sort of thing. Different data about curriculum or instruction. So you could do classroom observations or looking at teacher lesson plans. And also other data sources. So if you have like different school climate surveys, those are a really good thing to tap into. Or things that maybe you want to collect on your own. So if you want to do interviews, surveys, and develop those to collect your own data. Okay. So another quick, this is going to be one of the last ones, a little activity. So just looking at your evaluation questions, what data sources do you think you could use to answer those evaluation questions? And are there existing data sources that you can use? I think it's really important that if there's something already there, then you can utilize it and not add burden on yourself or other staff to have to collect that data. So I'll give us 1 minute here as well. All right. So we're going to move on to step 5, which is justifying our conclusions. So this is just a quick step, actually. So this is once you have your data, then you start to form conclusions about your program. And you want to make sure that those conclusions, evaluation conclusions about how well your program's working, if you're achieving the outcomes that you want to be achieving, that those are linked to the evidence that you gathered and are justified against different standards set by the stakeholders. So in the beginning, when you set those measures of your different outcomes, make sure that you're using those measures to evaluate how successful your program was. And I think it's really integral here to make sure you have those stakeholders engaged in this process. And you can think about how you end up sharing out findings based on the stakeholder involvement. So is it a formal presentation that you give to a group, or is it more of a conversation looking at the data and thinking about different lessons learned from the evaluation? And in step 6, we have foster evaluation use. So this is the last step in the process, but I really think of evaluation use as something that is ongoing. So it's something that you want to use the evaluation product at the end too, your findings, but it's something that should be facilitated throughout the evaluation process. And it really starts with engaging those stakeholders in our step 1, right? Having that relevant evaluation plan can really facilitate use throughout the process. And right, so the connection between the work of the evaluation and the program activities, that's kind of what evaluation use is. It's actually using this evaluation to improve our programs and ultimately, hopefully, our participants and yeah, the community in general. And there's a couple different kinds of use that I'd like to talk about. So we can think of use as instrumental. So this is the evaluation findings lead to some immediate or specific action taken by the program. So this could be a decision to continue the program, expand it. It could be just like mid-course corrections during your formative evaluation stage. But we could also think of use as more conceptual. So we could think about different general learnings that happen because of the program or that result from the evaluation. So because the evaluation takes place, perhaps some stakeholders change their mind about the effects of the intervention or the populations that we're serving. And so I just had a quick question here. So thinking about your evaluation of your ESSER program, how might you foster this evaluation use? And also, what are some of the organizational, political, or social factors that might influence the use of evaluation findings? I think it's also important to recognize that evaluation is only one input in this decision-making process, right? Stakeholders are often have multiple political needs and things to consider. And so thinking about your program, how might you facilitate this use? And also what's this larger context that might influence whether or not it actually becomes used? Okay, so we'll just think about this for maybe 1 minute. All right, so those were the 6 steps of the evaluation process that I wanted to share. I hope it's helpful in starting to think about how you will go about evaluating your ESSER funds. There's some additional resources, and I'm happy to share these out too. The CDC has a really good framework for evaluation if you want a little more information about those 6 steps and how to implement them. If you're interested in more logic models, the Kellogg Foundation has this really foundational paper on logic models. It's really good practice toolkit. It offers kind of step-by-step instructions for how to develop those logic models. And then one of the other regional labs has this handbook for continuous improvement. And so if you're interested more in learning about those PDSA cycles and how to utilize those, that's also a good toolkit to look at. All right, and so we have a quick feedback survey that Michelle's going to send over in the chat. If you have a chance, please fill it out. We'd love to get some feedback on the presentation. And this is just my contact information. If you have any questions or want any additional resources, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer those too. I'll go back to this in case you want to take a look. And yeah, so that's all I have for you today. If there's any questions, I know we're a small group, so feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions you might have about this process.
Will we be getting a copy of the slides?
Yes, I'll send one to Michelle and she can send it out to the group, I believe.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate you tuning in and joining. And again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And I'll stay online too if you want to stick around and ask anything.